Hi, I'm Vicky Carter, and you're listening to Let's Go Kickass today, Season 2, Episode 3. I'm bringing it to you in quite an unusual and scary time in the world, but it is the same format, hoping to empower and inspire you from wherever you're listening to this podcast, with interviews from the fields of music, adventure, and culture. All these interviews with participants have been done prior to the lockdown, so please do enjoy, stay safe, and stay inspired. In this episode, I chat to General Andy Salmon, CMG OBE, about how he spent 36 years of his life in the Marines and what life is like after the Marines, as well as his programmes, cultural performances, and productions with Journey Through Conflict.
Quite a hard phase for families to get used to is when people leave the services and that structure doesn't exist anymore.
I also chat to explorer Grazyna Machnik about what inspired her to go on expeditions and conquer the 7 summits North and South Pole.
Anyone who loves hiking or like mountaineering or any sport, any hobby they have, they definitely should do it.
I also chat to former NHS doctor, stage 4 cancer thriver and wellbeing activist Em Deacon. She tells me about how she dealt with learning she had stage 4 breast cancer and how to be satisfied with the life you live.
One of the first things that it's taught me is just how liberating it can be to start living your life for what it truly feels like rather than what it looks like on paper.
First up, I speak to General Andy Salmon, CMG OBE. He explains what life is like in the Marines, the type of work he did with interventions in Sierra Leone and humanitarian projects in Basra, highlighting the importance is working with the people and the community. He also picks up on how challenging it is to have a relationship whilst being in the army and talks about his programme Journey Through Conflict, fusing art, music and conversations for a cultural interchange.
It's a big title, and also I was wondering, what does CMG mean? I don't know what that means.
It means the companion of the Most Honourable Order of St Michael and St George.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
it's
fantastic.
It's normally a diplomatic award.
How did it feel receiving that?
Oh, well, I think it was on behalf of everybody who was in Basra at that time, because that's what it was for back in 2008 and 2009 when we closed down the campaign. And so it was awarded as a diplomatic recognition for everything that we'd done, which was more like military diplomacy and working with lots of different types of people and doing things in a slightly different way than a normal military approach.
That's so rewarding. As you're speaking about military, so you spent 36 years in the Royal Marines. Was that something that you always thought you'd end up doing?
No.
Okay.
So I joined the Royal Marines because I bumped into a guy serving a pint in my dad's pub back in when I was 16, 17. And he said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I might join the army or the navy or something," thinking of that. And he said, "What do you want to do that for? Have you heard about the Royal Marines?" And I said, "No," but that was it. So I ended up joining them, and they sent me off to university for a few years. So I studied modern history at Warwick University and then commenced my commando training back in 1980, which takes about a year, and then cracked on.
What was the training like? Do you think you were fully prepared go through those motions for what happened afterwards?
I think the training is amazing because it is quite hard. And as long as you are determined and don't want to give up and prepared to accept everything that is thrown at you, then your chances of success will be high. And then I think the second part of the question, in terms of how it prepares you for everything that's going to come afterwards, I think it prepares you really well. So you have to leave training, whether you're an officer or a Marine, from the Commando Training Centre in Lympstone, prepared and fit to fight in a commander unit straight away. So that's why it's so demanding, and probably the longest and most demanding type of basic course in the world. The Army is different because it's a bigger organisation with lots of different arms to it, so like logistics and transport, as well as infantry. The Royal Marines are really specialised amphibious infantry. But because they're required to work in extremely challenging scenarios in all sorts of environments anywhere in the world, it does mean that the basic training to give you what you need to be able to apply that to these different circumstances is really thorough and deep and hard. And getting through the commando tests, sometimes it's about a 50% pass rate. It's got a lot better sense, but it's hard because of the things that you're going to get involved in. The Army have got their own special forces, but you go and take selection and you do all of the training and become a special forces soldier. And of course, the Royal Marines provide nearly about 45% of UK special forces, partly because they're well prepared. So it's like a prep school for special forces in that respect.
And do you think the Army, the Navy, get recognised for the amount of hard work that they do?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think increasingly, partly because of Iraq and Afghanistan, the work that they do has been very much more in the public eye. Of course, when you've got a war like the Falklands or something, it really is very well covered, and so the recognition is there when you get home. You're treated like heroes when you come off SS Canberra, back in 1982 after fighting the campaign.
Well, you are heroes, though, so...
Well, who knows? I mean, but I mean, that you don't set out to be heroes, by the way. It's just that you're recognised and treated and valued and respected for what you've done. And I think what was interesting about Afghanistan and Iraq is that people did respect our soldiers, our servicemen and women, despite the fact that not everybody necessarily agreed. And the narrative over Iraq, for example, was, well, that was a pretty hopeless situation to put yourselves in the first place, so why did we do that? But despite that, I think the Wootton Bassett effect, for example, really put our servicemen and women in the public eye in a way that I think hadn't been so prominent since the Falklands War. Now, these wars, of course, are very different. They're smaller compared to the Second World War and the First World, which is a total war. Second World War in particular, when everybody's in it. So the modern wars don't feel the same. Northern Ireland never felt like that either. Things would happen in Northern Ireland might make the papers, like Warren Point or Bloody Sunday, but most of the stuff that happened in Northern Ireland, nobody really has a clue about.
You spoke before about the type of tactics and techniques that you and a number of other members of your team were awarded for. What made those moments so special, which you could provide an impact to the community that you were working with?
Yeah, it varies from operation to operation. So I suppose I've been privileged enough to work with lots of fantastic men and women of all shapes and sizes in different services throughout that career, and covered a spectrum of conflicts from humanitarian disaster to war, like the Falklands, and Northern Ireland, and interventions in Africa like Sierra Leone and the Balkans, and latterly as the commander of coalition forces in Basra, which we talked about at the beginning. So they're all very different. And at the heart of all of those operations, from my own perspective, are the people that you're there for. So I think it's quite important to look through the lens of people on the ground. And I think when you do that, you behave and you operate in a different way than if you were just trying to find an enemy in a conventional war, friend and enemy, like the Falklands, and do battle and defeat him or her, and then hopefully there's a peace and the war's over. But a lot of the campaigns in modern times are campaigns amongst the people. So I think looking through the lens of people is really important. And in Iraq in particular, in our campaign in 0809 when we were closing it down, that was very much the approach that we took, and that's what we were recognised for. And if you can pull that off, it's very satisfying for everybody involved, because you've helped build better lives for people on the ground, the indigenous population, the people in Basra, for example. You're helping fuel shape and protect their optimism and their belief that the future is going to be a better place and they can really buy into it than where they are right now. All of those things mean quite a lot to soldiers, because when you come back, you're questioning yourself about, well, what was all of that for? Did we do something which was worthwhile? I mean, I know that we went to fight or we went to create peace, but at the end of it, you've got to be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, yeah, I did that for a good reason. The legacy is good, and we can close that down. And that's quite a really important issue for veterans as well, you know, when they look back at the things that they've done, especially for those who've got life-changing injuries or mental and physical scarring from campaigns like Iraq and Afghanistan. So being able to look back and be able to say, yeah, we did the right thing and there was a good outcome means a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the situations now are incredibly more complex with the different groups of people and campaigns, that the environments you're going into. With regards to your training, obviously you're physically and mentally trained, but I mean, was that the kind of thing that you'd expect to go there and do humanitarian things as well?
No, you know, when you join, I mean, when I joined anyway, I mean, I don't know what my colleagues thought, but I wasn't really sure what we were going to do. I mean, I'd read history books about what commandos had done in different phases of history, so I was quite excited about that. It felt like it was an adventure, but you don't necessarily know exactly what situations you're going to be in, and especially during the Cold War, when in the 70s and the 80s we were fighting a war in the Oman, which was in the Dhofar, which is relatively unknown. Northern Ireland, you know, people knew about that from the TV and the screens, and we had quite a lot of troops over there. The Falklands came out of the blue. That was totally unexpected. Then, at the end of the Cold War, when we entered what Bush called the New World Order, which rapidly turned into a New World Disorder, so we're talking about the beginning of the 90s. 91, Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait, and all of a sudden, you know, we're at war. And then at the end of that, there's a humanitarian problem because the Kurds and the Shia rebelled. The Shia in the south, about 500,000 fled to the marshes. 1.5 million Kurds fled into the mountains of northern Iraq. And all of a sudden, we were intervening to invade northern Iraq to create a safe haven and get the Kurds back out of the mountains and save their lives. And you never anticipate any of that, because they were all, crikey, you're sitting in a bar 1 minute and then suddenly on the TV screen something's happening and you don't think much of it, but then you're involved in that picture the next week. So that's quite often what's happened.
And that's the kind of lifestyle you have to get used to. As you said before, just in that moment you could be deployed at any point. How has it been having a relationship with someone and having family values and adapting to that and being able to have a normal civilian life as well?
Difficult to have a normal civilian life if you're in a frontline, quick reaction type elite organisation. And I think quite a lot of the wives, if their husbands are communicating right to them, of course, they understand what all of that looks like. Doesn't make it necessarily any easier when the men go away to war. And in the early days before social media and the internet, you know, we were grateful if we got a bluey, a letter in our trench or wherever it was. You know, that was a big deal. The mail drop was a fantastic thing. That really was important for morale, as long as there weren't too many Dear Johns in it. But basically, you know, we survived on those letters. And then in the days of social media, I think it's got more difficult, especially if you're going into a long-term campaign like Iraq and Afghanistan, where you're based in forward operating bases. So you've got relatively, not necessarily totally secure locations, but you've got bases with good access to communications and social media and that sort of thing. And so sometimes it's harder for people to leave the baggage of family life behind, as well as the good things, but sometimes the domestic issues that soldiers or men and women are facing at home get sort of dragged into theatre with them if you're not careful. And especially if there's not much going on in theatre, you know, that can start to play on people's minds. And so the problems are carried over into the theatre. I think the hard and quite a hard phase for families to get used to is when people leave the services and that structure doesn't exist anymore. That life with everybody, and especially if you're in frontline units going on operations a lot, that's a real hard thing to stop doing and just become a civilian, because life is so different. I mean, you're not in that same structure and support network that you had before, and so I think it's important to help veterans transition to civilian life as best they can. I think we're a lot better at it now, but some of the stories, some of the problems that surface from either issues of the service life and operational issues, or just those kind of stresses and strains that everybody gets in their life, which manifest when you're away from that structure and then you're looking for support and it's not there. And I think those are issues that we really need to keep an eye on and do something about.
Especially when you're used to working in such a high pressure team environment the whole time, and you've always got people with you and you're always dependent on, and someone's watching your back, and then suddenly you're by yourself and you're not used to it. You're out in the world on your own.
Yeah, we a group of guys that I went through training with back in 1980. We all ended up being troop commanders in the command units during the Falklands War, and we had a reunion in the Falklands just before Christmas. We hadn't seen quite a few of the guys for a long time, and immediately, as soon as we met in the airport, I mean, the banter was flying, the stories were flying. It was just like we hadn't missed each other for all of that time. But what was really interesting was the different experiences that people had during that campaign and how it's impacted on the rest of their lives, because not everybody has a good war. Even if you have theoretically a good war, you might have done some things which actually come to haunt you later on. And there were all of those mixed feelings and emotions which surfaced during this 10-day trip that we were on in many different ways. So it was quite a profound trip to be able to share our stories and the things that have happened since. And, not everybody's got a great story to tell. Some people feel for one reason or another humiliation and guilt over what they've done, and that can surface years later in your 50s or 60s or even 70s, because nobody's really talked about it. Nobody's got it off their chest. And if there are issues that you are bottling up, I mean, unless they're released, it's going to chew you up inside, and that's why people have mental health issues and drink too much or other things.
And so is that your release journey through conflict, as well as highlighting the wonderful moments and experiences and cultural moments you took away?
Well, I think Journey Through Conflict was a serendipitous and organic phenomenon that happened in a really unexpected way out of the work that we've been doing in Iraq and the use of music and art and culture in bringing people together in different ways and creating a very positive and open-minded, relaxed environment for people to have constructive conversations about solutions to problems and peace and reconciliation. It was through talking about art and people getting really interested in the story behind the art, and then weaving in a personal journey through conflict through 3 different campaigns in Iraq, 91 with the Kurds, 2003 with the Americans in Baghdad, and then 0809 as the commander down in Basra. And then fusing that with music from a guy called Tom Donald, who was a film composer and won a number of awards for his Middle Eastern compositions in films like Leaving Baghdad and Tangled in Blue, when he said, let's put all of these stories to music. And then actually out of that came a production called Journey Through Conflict. And then I wanted to replicate the sounds of the Middle East and the sounds of Iraq. So, got an Islamic cleric to sing a call to prayer at the beginning. And then we mixed it in sacred places because it's quite multi-faith oriented. So we mixed all of that up, and that was our first ever production, which we performed in a festival back in Cheltenham in 2016, and have performed a few times since. And then we produced an album last year, which we launched in London with another performance. So that's how Journey Through Conflict started. It came out of the art and the stories and the music and the culture of Basra, actually.
That's great, that immersive experience of art and music and culture, and taking those traditional sounds and building that soundscape really allows people to embrace that moment and be a part of it. With regards to performing at the festival, and obviously as well with the most recent project, what has the response been like? Have people had open discussions? Have there been heated debates?
The response was amazing, and has been amazing, and is still amazing. We didn't really know what the response was going to be, because the first one was just an experiment. I mean, the fact that we sold out after a couple of weeks indicated there were people who were interested in it. The audience went through the emotional roller coaster of the performance. Some left and broke down. Wow. And has come back in. The audience were just totally mesmerised by the improvised music as well. So they were actually starting to meditate themselves. Because the music allows you, like art as well, these mediums touch you in different ways. There are different neural pathways that are starting to connect. So we know that the brain responds differently to the multi-sensory impact of different mediums of art and performance. So I think all of these things were happening, and it touches people profoundly. You don't know how it's touched them until they talk to you about it. We've had requests to do things in other parts of the world using this approach, like victims of Boko Haram in Nigeria, from an Islamic NGO to an archbishop in the Cameroon saying, can we use this approach to bring the conflicted south and the north together and create a new narrative for the country to bring us together. Those are just some of the requests we've had. So it's not just about military conflict, it's about any form of conflict. So it could be, as a request came in, to consider doing something for Anti-Slavery Day this year, so looking at women in slavery and the horrendous thing that happened, right in front of our eyes now, right in London now, all these things. So its application is universal. And the key thing that we've been experimenting with and trying to affect is that the people who take part in these productions are going through a journey through conflict. So they're inspired to want to tell their story or perform their story or read poetry or paint or whatever medium they want to express themselves in. And they're prepared to do that. And if they're prepared to do that, then as the performances grow and they get more confident about telling their story, because some of them have never told their story before, publicly, to hundreds of people, Joe Public coming into a festival. So they do that and they get really confident, and it changes them. And they're on this journey, and it accelerates that journey out to the other side. So that's fantastic when that happens, and it has happened. And then for the people who connect with it, that they find something particular to their circumstance which inspires them to do something different. So it's all about the combination of all of these things, is using this medium, this fusion, as a catalyst for change, changing people's lives for the better and inspiring people to go on journeys that they wouldn't have considered otherwise, and helping them along the way. So that's basically what it's all about.
Doesn't Andy have such an inspirational story to share? It's wonderful how his own experiences have such a domino effect with other people, creating this fusion of sounds and culture, which then influences people who watch his work and the inner conflict that they might be going through, to then hopefully inspire them to share their story too. Make sure to check out their website, journeythroughconflict.org, if you want to find out more. Next up is explorer Grazyna Machnik. She tells me about completing the 7 summits, the North and South Pole, as well as the Explorer's Grand Slam, her experiences of visiting Tibet and the eradication of their culture, what it's really like at base camp, as well as how on earth she managed to juggle working 7 days a week and training for her expeditions too. I'm here with Grazyna Machnik.
Perfect.
First Polish person to complete the Explorer's Grand Slam, second woman to complete it ever, 18th person in the world to complete it, and the youngest Polish woman to complete the 7 summits. Have I got all of those right?
No, all perfect. So there was 2 kind of categories in the Grand Slam. So it's one which is long distance, South Pole and North Pole, and then there is one which is just last degree. So I am like in the one which did the longer distance. So there's kind of 2 categories. So in my one, I'm like the 18th person. So
wow, that's incredible. When did you start doing these expeditions and challenges? What inspired you to take them on?
So I started 8 years ago when my dad became really ill. So he was very young and suffered a stroke.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Oh, no worries. So since then I decided, I wanted to do something. So I went and did Kilimanjaro. And absolutely loved it. It was such a beautiful place and really good fun. And then decided, I might do another one. So I did Aconcagua, Elbrus. And then I was like, I may as well do all 7 of them. And then once I did Everest, I decided, wait, it's almost finishing. I have 1 more to go. So I decided to add North Pole and South Pole. And it's kind of started.
Wow, that's incredible. How did it first feel climbing Kilimanjaro and also Everest as well? Because there's this huge stigma about, the popularity of Everest. Is it really worth it? There's loads of other hikes in Nepal as well, but also it's very expensive.
Kilimanjaro was like my start. I never thought I'm actually going to do 7 summits. It was just something for me to do. It was a great place to go. I've never been to Africa before. So, it was absolutely love it. Really, really cool people, really fun, met loads of amazing people. And then kind of inspired me, I may do something else. Where Everest is the one which everyone talks about. So there's 2 ways to do it, from the north side or the south side. So one is from Nepal and one is from Tibet, from China. So I decided to go from the north side, from Tibet, purely because there's less people.
I was going to say, not many people do that. Most people go through Nepal, so that's incredible. What was that experience like, especially to see Tibet? Because that's somewhere I would love to go and see.
You definitely have to go. Tibet is changing a lot. So there's lots of new buildings. They're changing the whole towns. So if you want to go, definitely go as soon as possible. Because in a few years' time, it's going to be a different place. Which is quite a shame. It's interesting place. There are cameras everywhere. Wherever you go, there's a police. So it's changing a lot. It's kind of losing a bit of the culture.
Yeah, I mean, I went to Makloy Ganj in India, where the Dalai Lama lives, and there's lots of information about the eradication of Tibetan culture in China. And so what you're saying to me just highlights that they're continuing to do so, and the surveillance there illustrates that, they're making sure that the Chinese government is overthrowing what they think is someone taking over their country.
It's really sad to watch. It's such a shame, because it's great to go somewhere where there's the local culture, local people, but it's changing a lot. Like listening to the stories and what's happening there, it's extremely sad. I'm gutted that in a few years' time it's actually going to disappear pretty much.
What was your experience like going from Everest through there then? Because I'm guessing you managed to integrate and learn some of the culture in Tibet, but also in China whilst you were doing Everest.
Yeah, so we didn't really do kind of much. We just went to Lhasa, which is like the capital of Tibet. Spent there a few days, went to see all the local temples. So we did, like, every time you go to Everest and all your local guys, they wouldn't go on the mountain if they don't receive all the blessings. So you will be spending the time going through all the blessings and doing kind of a little bit of the culture, which is amazing. You see the local people, and some of them will take you to the houses. Like the food is different and everything. They're really religious there as well. Like every day they will go in a circle praying. So it's amazing to watch it. We absolutely loved it. It's just a shame because wherever you go, there are cameras, and you're like, that's gutting. Like the people really can't do anything. They don't have passports. They can't go from one side of Tibet to the other side without special permissions. So it's just heartbreaking to hear how their life looks like. Very sad, but still beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous place.
Yeah, it is sad to see and be a part of, and also it makes you realise how lucky you are as well with the freedom to travel and explore their beautiful country without the same restrictions that they have. So what was it like actually hiking Everest? How did you train for that, and was it as popular as you imagined doing that trek from that side?
Everest is very, very popular. Not my side. So on the south side from Nepal, I think at the year I was there was around 600 people.
Wow.
Probably more, 650. On my side, there was 140 of us. Wow. So it's much, much less people. And also when we were going to the summit, everyone split. So we didn't go at the same time. So when there was the first window, I don't know, maybe 40 people went. Second window. And then also everyone discussed between each other what time you're going. So we didn't have any queues. When we were going to the summit, you could see lots of people, lots of lights, but we didn't have to stop because of the queues. We just got there and went down. So we had an amazing experience, absolutely fantastic. I haven't had any of the stuff which I hear on the TV. So definitely recommend. It's a great site. It's probably not as much fun because I know the south side base camp is just party place and all the things which I know everyone apparently loves, but it's not for me. I didn't want that. I wanted just a true mountaineering. I didn't want a party place. I just wanted to see the local culture and the nature.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I'd like you to paint a picture really for those listening who, and me as well, who've got no experience of what Everest is like, because you're saying about base camp being a party scene. I had no idea it was a party scene. You're just about to hike Everest, like there's people actually partying before they do this, and also looking at the windows as well. So that means there's significant queues. So you have a certain time where people have to go so that's not overcrowded. Is that correct?
So on the south is a little bit different because a lot of people who go to base camp not necessarily climbing the summit. So that's why there might be more people like kind of a little bit having partying, having fun, because they're not going to the summit. So whoever is going to the summit, 100% they are not partying. They're working really hard.
Yeah.
They are doing acclimatization. There's no way anyone is drinking. Maybe the people who go to base camp, just to see it, is different. It's probably a different experience, but I haven't been on that side, so I can just say what I heard, what people say. But my side from the north side is completely different. It's quite a flat area. It's very different. When you arrive there, you also don't hike there. You actually drive to the base camp from the north side. So it's completely different. You just arrive there and here we go. It's your base camp. It's a huge, huge area, just like mountains around, and you can see the summit of Everest from there. So it's beautiful when you wake up and you can see just a huge mountain, absolutely gorgeous. But it's very, very different. With the windows, so you kind of do a lot of acclimatization. So sometimes it can be at the beginning of the month, it can be in the middle. So you kind of never know. Usually it's from mid-May until the end of the month. And again, it depends how long is the window. So you may have 2 good days, 3 good days. It all depends where you are with your acclimatization. So if you are ready, you might go straight away for the window if the guides think it's a good time to go and everyone is ready. If not, you may wait for a second window, and it's the same. You just never know how long is the window, how many days there's of good weather. Because from the base camp, you have to get all the way to the summit, which takes around 4 or 5 days. So you need a kind of a good window, quite a few days of good weather in order to get there.
It must be frustrating for people who are waiting for their window, and the weather's not good enough and they've spent that journey, but you have to think of safety as a priority in that situation.
Oh yes, of course. No, it doesn't matter like how long you want to wait. If the weather is bad, you are not going. It's not worth to risk your life just to try to go in bad weather. So for us, it doesn't matter if I have to wait another 2 weeks, another 3 weeks. That's fine. I will wait as long as I have to. I just want to be safe and come back from the mountain.
Yeah, that's smart. I think that's a really good idea. What was the training process like? It must have been pretty grueling. I mean, for all of your mountains, and how did they differ with each expedition as well?
So at the beginning, I don't think I took it like seriously. So Everest and all the other mountains, Kilimanjaro, at the beginning of my mountains was like, oh, it's great, it's just holidays. So I'm just gonna go and climb. So I haven't done much at the beginning. I took it definitely more seriously for Denali, for Elbrus, for Everest, for all the high up mountains. I train a lot. So I would train in altitude chamber.
What? How do you do that?
So I think in London there's 2 gyms which have an altitude, or 2 or 3 more maybe now. So it's a special room which kind of imagine that you are at 3,000 meters. So it's less oxygen.
Wow.
So you go and train there. So it's the same like a normal gym, just with less oxygen.
Gosh, you can get everything in London. How did you factor the training around your schedule at work?
So I work for now like 7 days a week, just because my expeditions are so expensive and I've paid for all of them by myself. So it's really tough to be able, to work and train as well. So I will be going every day after work to the gym, train for 3-4 hours if I was lucky, come back home, and the same every day for 3-4 months before I was going.
When do you rest?
Not much. It is every so often. I've been used to it. I've done it for such a long time. And that, my holidays is my rest time.
But you're hiking mountains. I'm really stressed by this. How much sleep do you get?
Oh no, I still get my 8 hours. Okay. So no. It's not unsafe or anything like that. Okay. No, I will train a lot, but I would make sure I rest as well.
That's good. I'm glad. So, do you mind telling me a little bit more about the Explorers Grand Slam? What does that entail?
So Explorers Grand Slam is climbing all the 7 summits, which is the highest mountain on each of the 7 continents, as well as skiing to the North Pole and skiing to the South Pole.
So yes, you mentioned that before because you did the 7 summits and then you were like, actually, I'm going to take on North Pole and South Pole. What was that like? Because it's a completely different exercise and completely different training, and also mentally preparing for that as well.
It's completely different. It's even your clothing, the whole thing, the weather, everything is very, very different. I absolutely loved it. It's beautiful. Both of them are a little bit different, North Pole and South Pole, but they're gorgeous. There's absolutely nothing apart of snow and ice. It's just nothing. It's only white and nothing there. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
How are they different, the North Pole and the South Pole?
So North Pole is you are skiing on the ocean. So it's not on land, so you're also floating at the same time. So when you're skiing, you may wake up one day and you actually floated overnight 3 miles or 2 miles, but you may be floating towards the pole or away from the pole. So the weather and the wind is, is a big issue there because you're always moving. So you don't just ski, you skied 20 kilometers today, you stop and you're in the same place, you're just always moving. So the North Pole is flat, but because of the ice, there's kind of like little ice jungles. So you may be going on beautiful flat area, and 20 meters later, there's a 50 meters kind of blocks. You have to take your skis off. You're fighting through it with your sled because you can't really ski. It's just like blocks of ice all over the place. It's beautiful, absolutely gorgeous, but it's also really hard work.
You're saying this so carefully, absent-mindedly, oh, it's beautiful, but it is hard work. Yeah, it sounds like it. How can you prepare for this? Because it's just a completely different setting. And also, I guess you're still using the same kind of leg muscles that you would do mounting, but rather than ascending, you're actually going across. And how do you prepare for this?
So yeah, it's quite similar. It's not altitude training anymore, but it's still the same. You're still using your legs. You're still pulling a sled. So it's the same gym. As I live in London, I don't really have much time to be going and practicing on the mountains or, skiing somewhere. So I will be always training in the gym. A lot of, running, a lot of going on the stepping machine, on the little stairs. So yeah, stairs were my best friends when I was training for that.
Wow, there you go. Just train on a step machine and you can ski across the North Pole or South Pole. That's amazing. So what was the South Pole like in difference? So South Pole,
I was doing different distance. So North Pole, in the last 5 years, or say 6 years now, nobody really skied all the way to the North Pole. So normally the full distance is around 900 kilometers. So nobody haven't done it because of the global warming, because of the weather. It's just not possible. The whole way it's not frozen anymore. So I done the last degree, which a lot of people do it currently. So that's 110 kilometers. So it's much shorter. The South Pole, I did the full distance, which is 918 kilometers, and it took us 45 days. So it's much longer expedition. It's more flat, but you're also changing the altitude. So you start, I think, 600 meters and you finish at 2,800 meters. So you not just going flat, but there's up the hills. You're gaining altitude. So it's slightly different. It's much longer expedition. So that's the main one.
I'm a bit speechless, to be honest, because I thought I was adventurous, and I've interviewed some, pretty incredible adventurous people. But 45 days, you're dealing with this. What were the challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome those moments?
So probably the weather is the main one, because it's really cold. So the temperature is changing every day, and you need to be really careful with frostbites. It can very quickly turn really bad. So if you don't take care of your skin, and you end up with frostbite, you are in the middle of Antarctica. It's not that easy to just, go back home. So that's definitely all the clothing, taking care of your skin. And the same is a long expedition. So you kind of mentally have to be prepared. There are other people with you. There was 4 of us. So also it's a long time with the same people going, the same view every single time. So it can be very monotonic. It's every day you wake up at the same time. You leave the tent at the same time. Exactly the same. You eat breakfast at the same time, the same breakfast. You ski for 8 to 10 hours, have 50 minutes skiing, 10 minutes break. Then you set up your camp, and again you spend time 2-3 hours melting water, eating your dinner, preparing everything for the next day, for your breakfast. So it's 45 days of pretty much doing the same thing. So it can become very boring. You just have to make sure you entertain yourself, and you have to be really good with thinking about different things.
Yeah, exactly, and keeping your mind active as well. What was it like actually, every time you come back from an expedition and, get back into normal civilian life, your normal civilian life of 7 days?
I don't know, it's probably a bit boring because it's like I love the views, I love the challenge, I love being away for a long time. So when you come back, it's a bit sad that it's all finished. I like going away somewhere where it's just nature. Especially living in London, you're used to it. There's always people around you. It's very busy and life goes really fast. So it's nice to just escape and just have a nice, quiet times. For me, it's always really sad to come back. I'm always gutted.
That's why you set yourself your next challenge. That I can understand that. What does it feel like being a part of an elite group of people who have done the challenges that you have?
Oh, I don't feel like that way. I think it's like there's quite a lot of people who done it. So for me, it's just like I do it for myself. I do it something I enjoy and I love doing. So, anyone who loves hiking or like mountaineering or any sport, any hobby they have, they definitely should do it. So for me, it's just something I enjoy doing. Like, don't ever listen to whatever people say. I heard many times, you can't do it, you shouldn't do it. Never listen to people. If you enjoy it, just do it.
How does it make you feel when people try to push you away from achieving your dreams and making those comments?
For me, it gets the opposite reaction. Like if somebody tells me I can't do something, I will prove them that I can do it. So I don't mind. I may get upset a little bit at the beginning, but then I will show them that, I will do it, and I will show you I will do it. I had that actually even when I was on Everest. I think the first week, our main Sherpa was saying, because there was me and 2 other boys. And he was like, you boys are going to do it. You train a lot, you will do it. And then he can, you're not going to do it. You're not going to make it to the summit.
He said that to you on the expedition. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, there was a first week as well. Like, you actually haven't seen anything. We done like one walk, that's it. So he's like, you're too tired. You're not going to make it. And then when we were going to the summit, I was with different Sherpa. And so they left with his client like an hour earlier. And me and my Sherpa left and like pretty much last from the whole camp. And then when we were going to the summit, we overtook him and actually summited before him. So he didn't even say congratulations, nothing. He just completely blanked me on the summit. And only like the next day I apologized and said, congratulations, well done.
Yes, there we go. Slowly, step by step, we're changing people's opinions on women in mountaineering. That's incredible. Oh, I'm happy for you. So what's next? So you've done mountaineering. Well, I'm sure you'll probably do even more challenges and skiing as well. What's now grabbed your attention?
So I still would love to do mountaineering and still skiing. I absolutely love it. I started doing rowing as well. So I want to see if I can combine a bit of rowing and mountaineering and skiing together.
Wow, Grazyna. She wants to combine mountaineering, rowing and skiing. That is beyond impressive. Good luck to her next ventures. Finally, I speak to former NHS doctor, stage 4 cancer thriver and wellbeing activist Em Deacon. She tells me about how she dealt with learning she had stage 4 breast cancer and given a 3 to 5 year life expectancy, and how upon learning this news, her attitude and perspective on life has changed. A positive and can-do attitude is infectious, and hopefully after listening to our interview, you can learn to live your life to the full and live it by how you want to live it, rather than how society says you should. I'd first like to learn more about your background working in the NHS. So you worked specifically in medical and surgery and mental health as well. Looking at the specific areas, what would you say were the challenges and the highlights as well for each area?
So to summarise my background, so after completing medical school, I spent the first 2 years working across specialties, as you've kind of alluded to, medicine, paediatrics and surgery being some of those, and then I specialised in the area of mental health. I think every area that I've worked in I've loved. There's been something about it that I've loved, as well as a few things that I haven't. For surgery, I'd say I love the fact that you can impact huge change within a day. Surgery is always just a few hours and usually it's transformative. Pediatrics, I love children. They're just the best. Obviously it's not nice seeing them unwell, but fortunately most childhood illnesses, they do get better. And yeah, those are some of the highlights I'd say. And then obviously mental health, I specialised in that area, so that was clearly my passion.
Yeah. And then you received the tragic, shocking news that you had stage 4 diagnosis of breast cancer. When you got the news, I mean, what was your first reaction and feeling for that?
It was horrible, really. And I don't think words will ever kind of convey just how devastating it has been. Being I was 30 at the time, 31 now, being so young, I just would never have expected to be in that position. So it's bad enough having breast cancer, and then to be told that it was stage 4, incurable, and considered palliative. Horrific. But as a mum, you think about your child or your children and what impact it may have if you're not around. That's kind of what I was and am really stuck on. Yeah, that's my main kind of challenge. Yeah.
And so how did you prepare yourself for, I mean, they said you've got 3 years to live. How do you prepare yourself and put into place, okay, this is what I'm going to do? Do you live for every moment, or do you just go to a day-to-day routine? Because I think every day must be a struggle, just trying to be okay for your daughter as well.
Yeah, so first thing to say is that they have said that they've said it's definitely, they don't consider it curable and that I'm palliative. They've said they can't tell me how long I have, but that on average people have 3 to 5 years. So as much as those are the statistics, I'm a realist and I accept that, but there are anomalous cases and people who do beat the odds. So that is my hope and that is my intention. But nonetheless, it is difficult having such uncertainty in my life in terms of planning and living, kind of looking forward. But I would say that I've weirdly somehow managed to adjust. I've adopted a kind of new outlook on life, in that I am living sort of for the here and now. I'm trying not to live in the past and I'm trying not to live in the present. And yeah, that's kind of my philosophy. Obviously, there are things that I have to put in place, for my daughter and my husband if the worst should happen. But aside from those kind of logistical things, I do just try to, make the most of life, as we all should be doing. Yeah.
Wow, you're so courageous, and it's wonderful that out of this experience that it's changed your perspective on life. What are you hoping people will take away from your own experience, and how they can change their own outlook in life?
That's a great question, because I've learned a lot from this experience, and there is a lot that I would love to convey to people. So one of the first things that it's taught me is just how liberating it can be to start living your life for what it truly feels like rather than what it looks like on paper. And I guess what I mean by that is, before my diagnosis, from someone looking from the outside in, I had quite a good life in terms of a good career as a doctor. I was married with a child by the age of 30, and everything was quite secure and looked good, but I wasn't truly living my life. It was more of an existence, which is quite I hate to admit it, but that is the truth. But now that I've had my diagnosis, I've in a way been kind of set free from expectation, and sadly I think so many of us do live our lives for, you know, keeping up or appearances, and that is just no longer a part of my life, and that's definitely one of the silver linings. So I would love for other people to take that approach if they can, without having to have some sort of devastating news to get them to wake up.
It's a lot of sense what you've been saying, that some people feel that they have to live a life that's what everyone else does, and they've got to follow certain ways of living and goals that everyone else has to achieve. I mean, what simple things would you say for someone to make sure that they love themselves, that they're truly happy, and they're looking at what they want to do in life fully and 100% for them rather than society?
I think it's a great question, because it's lovely to talk about these things, but actually logistically on a day-to-day basis, how do we go about achieving this philosophy? And I would say that to start small and build from there. So most of us, I was definitely like this. I had to be productive, and I kind of think you're probably one of those people.
You're looking at me, I'm like, yeah, that's me.
I had to be productive every kind of hour of the day. What was I achieving? What was I accomplishing? And that is a kind of, if we live like that, we're chasing the treasure at the end of the rainbow. We're never going to be doing enough, achieving enough, and we'll never be satisfied. So to kind of switch our approach to carving out some time, at least just to begin with, whether it's half an hour, 20 minutes a day, to have non-productive time doing something that just feels good, something that you are not going to see a direct return on then and there. Because once we do invest in ourselves and have that true downtime, A, it feels good, and B, all of the other projects that we are involved in will benefit if we're truly able to relax, switch off. That is, you know, where creativity arises from.
So for people who find it difficult to switch off, like me, what would you recommend for them to do so? Or if they struggle with finding their me time, their downtime, I mean, what kind of key things would you recommend?
Yeah, I was exactly the same. So going through medical school, that takes up all your time, and that takes you from your teen years into your early adulthood. So for me, hobbies, me time, downtime, non-existent. I just didn't know how to do anything like that. So the first thing I would say is make a commitment to it, and then trial and error. It may be that you're somebody who loves a particular form of exercise or knitting or whatever it may be. You've just got to commit to having time for yourself, and probably that will start with filling your time with something, but it doesn't necessarily have to be something that's purpose driven. So I guess pursuing a hobby, whether it's bouldering or colouring in or a salsa class, whatever it may be, I think the only way to truly find it, if you're somebody who's not used to that approach, is to look and just trial and error and experiment, and you will quickly find, okay, knitting's not for me, or I'm just using that as a silly example, but I hope it conveys the point that if we're not even interested or committed to prioritising ourselves, it's not just going to fall into our lap. That's not how life works, particularly in our capitalist, outcome-driven society. Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I literally have had an adult colouring book for years by the side of my bed that I've never opened because I've never had the time to do it, because I'm always exhausted by the time I go to bed.
Exactly.
And salsa as well. You know, I've always like, I want to learn how to salsa, and it's always at the bottom of my list.
Well, start with 5 minutes each day. 5 minutes a day, 7 days a week, and build from there.
Yeah. And so you say that, well, you state you're a well-being activist. What does it mean to be a well-being activist?
So to me, it means that I'm all about spreading the message that you don't need permission from somebody, whether that's an external person or an external thing or event, to invest in your well-being. You need to take up that mantle yourself and be committed to it. And I'm all about spreading that message, but also trying to provide practical tips for how one would go about, investing in themselves. Because if we don't invest in ourselves, I think burnout is something that's, heading in our direction. Yeah.
No, definitely burnout, exhaustion. My emotions can run high if I haven't slept properly in weeks and I'm doing too much. Like all these things. I'm completely agreeing with you. Definitely. So what kind of things do you have? Workshops in place and classes, and you can give outreach to people?
Yeah, so I do run my own workshops. It's actually a course that I run. It's called the Maximise Your Life course. And that's a whole day which is geared towards equipping people with building their own toolkit. A toolkit is a concept where you have techniques and practices that you can introduce into your life in a non-negotiable way, I like to say, where you are giving yourself a maintenance dose ideally every day. But then if you're having a particularly difficult week at work or with family, personal stuff, you can draw on these things. And I'm very much an advocate for people building their own bespoke toolkit, because there is no formula, or nobody can promise you a fix-all. You've got to kind of do the work on your own. And my course is about equipping people with a guide and how to go about that process, really. Yeah. And I have carried out a number of workshops for other people who have asked me to come in and carry those out as well. Yeah.
I think it's amazing that you're sitting here, and you said that you've just come out from recovery as well. What was the process like of that? Well, throughout your recovery the whole time, and how do you feel now?
Yeah, so I had 2 weeks ago I had a mastectomy. So that's an operation to remove my breast, and then about 8 weeks ago I had my ovaries removed as well, and it's been difficult, but I have to say that because of my approach to life and mindset, I don't think it's been as challenging for me as it could have been. I'm all about us mastering and advocating for people to master their thoughts in order to master their reality. And words will never be able to convey the extent to which this has helped me and the extent to which I know it can help others. Our circumstances just don't have to dictate how we feel about life. They are one component, but there are many other things we can do to feel good about life, regardless of what we're going through. Yeah, so it's been difficult, but I'm very happy and grateful for the life that I'm living despite that. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I'm sitting here in awe because, you're telling me all of these experiences and ordeals and operations you've been through, and yet you're still empowering and inspiring people and wanting to live each moment to the full and hoping to change other people's lives. And I think that's incredible. I really do.
Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you. I am genuinely very passionate about it. And my next challenge is really just how to spread the message, because if I'm sitting here genuinely with a real smile on my face despite what's going on, then I know that other people can also find happiness with what they may be going through, but sometimes it just takes a bit of direction, really.
And what would you say to people who have gone through similar situations or are going through similar situations and are really struggling?
I would say that life can be really hard. I'd also say that I kind of wish that we were brought up with the idea that life is going to be full of challenges, because we're all unfortunately still, I think to this day, kind of fed this fairy tale idea of what life should be about and what to expect. So when hurdles and challenges arise, we're all kind of surprised and devastated, whereas I think we should kind of factor them in. Hopefully not factoring in any as extreme as mine, but still challenges will arise. And then what I would say is, there's no right way to deal with adversity. You have to find what's right for you. But if you do want to take an empowered approach, there are things that you can do. The things that really helped me, I'd say, were diving head into sort of personal growth and self-empowerment podcasts, books, events. There are people who will choose an empowered kind of positive path, and that works really well for them, and I'm one of those people, and it has meant that I'm continuing to live a fulfilled life. But for other people, that they may struggle with that, or that may not be the path for them, and I would never want anybody to feel guilty or bad about the approach that they choose. They have to do what's right for them, really.
Isn't Em so wonderful? I hope you took away some life lessons as I did in that interview. And if you want to find out more about her content, what she does, go onto our website, deaconwell-being.com, where there's also links to her Instagram, where she posts real honest and authentic content. Well, that's it from Season 2, Episode 3 of Let's Go Kickass today. Thank you so much to all those who were involved, and you as well, for listening. Feel free to comment, rate, subscribe and share. I'm Vicky Carter, and you keep kicking ass.